Welcome, everybody, back to Soccer Wise. David Goss and Jordan Angeli finally back on the microphones once again. Jordan hasn't had anything to do for the last 2 weeks, so I had to pull her back in so we could chat about some of the biggest stories around NWSL and some of the things that we've just been thinking about over and over and over again. Jordan, you were in my neck of the woods once again this weekend, but I did not get to see you, but you had an eventful weekend.
We were so close. At one point, we were only like 9 miles away, I think.
Which would have taken 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Between, I don't even know. Is it Chase Stadium still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. Whatever. We're Inter Miami, won MLS Cup, and where the World's Sevens football was. Maybe it's World
in
Sevens.
Advance,
I think I added too many S's there.
Nice. That's good to know you were there for a while. In advance, I didn't know that it was at Bankyard Field or whatever, which is where I went. Gotham played some of their preseason games there.
Yeah, against Fort Lauderdale United. That's where they play their games. And I saw a lot of those players at the tournament watching over the weekend. What an experience, I should say, Goss. You have worked and called games at TST. It's very similar vibes on a smaller scale, I would say, than TST because there's, just 8 teams in the tournament, whereas TST, it feels like there's a bajillion now. But it was so much fun to be able to talk to Caroline Seger, Anita Santi, Laura Georges, Tobin Heath, Kelly O'Hara, some of the people that they've used as this advisory board to get this rolling and really invest in women's football in a different way. The prize pot was total $5 million. If you participated in the tournament, you got, I think, $250,000
as a team.
As a team, if you won, you got $2 million. So some of those players for San Diego took home. Well, not some of them. I think they were saying it was about $60,000 a person.
Not a bad
you
weekend.
Won, because it was split between club and team and staff and everything. But that is a much greater prize than you get if you win NWSL championship. So San Diego, happy to take home that prize, and they brought it. It was so fun to watch them play. They did not drop a point. The San Diego Wave were the only team in the tournament that did not drop a point the whole entire weekend. And yeah, I was recovering from the weekend because there were so many games, but it was really fun to be a part of there. And Miami really showed up with some perfect weather.
Yeah, it was very, very nice. I thought it was a little bit hot.
It was a little hot.
It's hotter than it's been, and it cooled off again, and it's gorgeous right now. But people have compared it to TST, but the difference is it's real. TST is fun and great, and there's a lot to it, but it's always this half in, half out of okay, the big names, how close will anyone be to actually being in shape or in their careers or whatever? And this one, it's we're talking about Kenza Dali.
Yeah. And she showed Christiani was amazing for Flamengo, 40 years old, still playing soccer at the highest level, still out there with the best assist of the tournament. She took it off of her thigh and then back heel assisted to Glaucia. If you haven't seen that highlight, you need to go watch it because it was an incredible goal. Yeah, these players brought it, and there was a lot on the line. And you could tell the first day, it is about fun. It is about giving these players a little bit of joy and remembering what playing football is all about and some of the skills and the celebrations and the entrances and all that. But when it went from day 1 to day 2, you could tell it just cranked up a little bit. And then the third day with the knockouts and the final was very intense. We even saw a keeper injury, got her face sliced open. Panos from Club America. I think it was Christiani who ended up doing that. So there's a lot of money on the line, and these players want that money. I think for a lot of people that's life-changing money, but you think about some of these South American players in Colombia or Uruguay, they don't really get paid at all. And so that money for them is significant. And so they were fighting hard to get a little chunk of that money.
So you did it once. This is only the second ever time this tournament's happened. It happened, obviously, in Europe around the Champions League. This last Champions League, I'm trying to think of a calendar.
Yep, it just happened in May.
Right. So that was last Champions League. We're in the middle. We're currently watching Champions League. So that's why I'm trying to figure out what's going on. If I hired you as a sporting consultant saying, I want to win a World Sevens, what does my team need?
Yeah.
What were the game states that you found that were most important, or like the little intricacies that you've now taken away?
Goalkeeping is huge. Even though the goals are small, the shots can come from anywhere. So you have to have quick reactions. I think quick reactions from goalkeepers is paramount. And then I thought the teams that were most successful were the teams with the best 1v1 artists. Maria Sanchez had herself a tournament. I think she scored 6 goals. 6 or 7, I should know that. But she scored a hat trick, and her third goal of her hat trick was like, it went outside the post before it came back in from across the field. It was amazing. So she just is willing to take people 1v1. I thought for Kansas City, their best player was Alex Pfeiffer, who is this young player who plays on the wing and will drive at people and make them feel uncomfortable. The teams that were successful had the best 1v1 artists. And then it's really about using every inch of that field. So can you pass around enough to create isolations? I think that's why San Diego was successful, because they moved the ball like they did all season. They were just pinging it around people. So I would say you need a few of those just players that pulled the strings, but you can't. I don't think you can win if you don't have a 1v1 or 2 1v1 artists. So you definitely need that in your back pocket.
So you're telling me Tobin Heath advises on a tournament and it comes down to 1v1 ability? I can't even imagine.
Right? Yep. Yeah, and they were just having the best time, those advisors, having the best time all weekend. I was talking to Caroline Sager, and I was like, how did you do this without wanting to play? She's like, I want to play every time. I want to put an old team, like an old players team together. And I was like, that would be awesome. She goes, yeah, you would play on the team. And I go, if you want me to play on your team, Caroline, like I will play on your team. Easy.
It would be legendary to see, which I think we'd all be excited about. Obviously, Heather O'Reilly has won every TST I think there's ever been.
Yeah.
So already has a little bit of a game plan to get there. But I was sad I missed it in person. It looked awesome. Our own Morgan Tenza was there taking photos. Yes. So we have some great photos of you as well, like professional level stuff. So if you ever need a profile update or anything like that.
I need to hit up Morgan. She was awesome all weekend just to get to see her. And, we do all this virtually. So to be able to see people in real life is such a joy. And it was usually us like going in separate directions, but just to see her and be like, hi, how you doing? How's it going? You survived.
The other thing is you normally call games remotely, and obviously this wasn't exact style or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you get any feel about San Diego Wave differently now going into 2026 than you had coming out of the season?
I think I had I liked what I felt from San Diego, but I had a chance to talk to Jonas and to talk to Becky, and actually we talked to Jonas after the championship on DAZN. He came over and was speaking with us, and he's got like some humor to him, Gus. I didn't check that during the season. Is it like
dark Scandinavian humor?
Yeah. Well, I told him I asked him how the ice bath felt afterwards, because he got dunked by the Gatorade bottle, and he said, it was cold, and also I realized I need to go to the gym more because he was wearing a white T-shirt, and it was very revealing. I was like, or just wear a dark T-shirt next year, Jonas. Like, there's a pretty easy solution to that. So he had some humor, and just to talk to them and see how much they really said, actually, the biggest thing that they're going to take away from this is really good team bonding.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to just be together again.
And the players, especially in San Diego, were super creative on how they did their entrances and what their goal celebrations would be. And in order to do that, you have to sit together and have those conversations and laugh about what you're going to do and practice it and do all this. And I don't know, that seems that could be an X factor with a group if you really can get along and understand people beyond the field. I think this San Diego team really relished that opportunity that they had. So I feel like Didi Hadicic afterwards said, the biggest takeaway is, this is a team we're going to fight with in 2026, and I really like the group we're with. So pretty nice. But then, their leading goal scorer, Mackenzie Roby, they ended up saying that they weren't going to keep her on the team. So I don't know. Maybe not all those people are going to be on the team in 2026, but I feel like there was a real deep bonding going on within the group that could be the difference with them when push comes to shove next season.
Awesome to get another soccer event on the calendar. I like this idea of it crossing between the two of Europe and the Americas, although I think the thing we all want to see is for all those teams on the field at the same time, which might require some form of calendar switch or someone to play at a weird portion of their off season, whatever it ends up being. It would be really, really cool to finally see that all go down. Let's dig into some big NWSL news, and then we will get to some of our wider thoughts about the league. And I don't think you can start an NWSL show right now and not talk about Trinity Rodman first. I don't think it's legally allowed for any of us, contractually allowed, whatever phrase you want to use. And it continues to drag out and turn in every single direction. So the latest news that we have is Trinity Rodman is a free agent. Her contract finished up at the end of the year. Coming out of the NWSL final, it was reported that Washington Spirit and Trinity Rodman had agreed to a contract and that it had been sent to the league office and it had been vetoed by the league office. And so now they're back at square one. Since then, Trinity Rodman's agent has come out and said the NWSL is forcing Trinity Rodman to go and have conversations elsewhere because they refuse to allow her to make her market value, and therefore she has no choice but to go have conversations outside of NWSL. The most recent quote that I have is one from Nathan Minion, who's the general manager under new president of soccer operations, Haley Carter, which is a whole nother thing we still have to discuss involved in all of this. And the quote is, "I think the league is committed to working with us, and we're committed to working with them through that. And with it is kind of a lot of back and forth. So it's just a continual process. And that's why I say we're having probably daily conversations with them, trying to figure this out and trying to get a resolution that can hopefully keep Trinity here with us for a long time." This was in a press conference that Minion and Carter gave. It was the first one since they were officially announced and put into their positions. So there's a lot to digest here. To me, it comes away as a few big notes. The first is Trinity Rodman wants to play for the Washington Spirit, and she wants to play in NWSL. And the last time we sat down and spoke for this show, that was not the case. So that alone is a huge piece of news. It then trickles into the restrictions on how Washington can go about keeping her. And then on top of all of that, after the veto, the NWSL Players Association filed a grievance with the league for them vetoing the contract and the contract structure because they didn't understand or they don't believe that it should have been. Where do you want to start with all of this?
Well, I think I have a question just on that last part. Like, what even happens when you file a grievance with the league? I know what it means in general, but like...
Yeah. I guess the league has to investigate itself, or I would assume in the CBA, there is some process that's agreed upon. Maybe there's a third-party arbitrator that looks at it, whether that's a soccer entity or not, I don't know. But
Yeah, I was just kind of scratching my head about that because I don't really know what happens when that.
Well, we love being labor lawyers. Like this is really fun for us.
Well, it is one of my jobs.
Yes, you needed an extra one because starting a team and broadcasting and everything else you do wasn't enough.
Yeah, I just needed one more. That was just a light load, just something light. So I'll get back to you on what that really means.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I do think that the biggest part of this is Trinity wants to stay here, and she wants to stay in Washington because the fact that they got to a place where they had a contract that she felt comfortable with kind of what her agent was saying makes it sound like they weren't talking to other clubs. I can't imagine that. I imagine she's talking to, like, he's not going to be silly. Like, how do you know her market value if you're not talking to other clubs?
Right. Now, at a minimum, I could look you in the eyes and say, I'm not talking to other clubs, but clubs could reach out and say, we'd love to have Trinity here. This is our initial offer.
Okay.
Which in theory you could fake into not.
Yeah.
But I get your point fully.
Yeah. I just think that was really, to me, I was, of course, disappointed that it didn't end up going through when it comes to the NWSL and their side of things not approving the contract. But I also felt pretty hopeful that, okay, they got to a place where at least she feels comfortable that she could stay. So maybe I'm silly for feeling hopeful that this could actually work out. Am I silly for feeling hopeful?
No, because I think the most important part of all of this is Trinity Rodman's desire to be there. Like, you could invent 97 contract structures. If Trinity Rodman wants to play for a different team, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that was, and we didn't know, which wasn't, we assume she doesn't, but Alyssa Thompson had left. Naomi Girma had left. Like, we didn't know.
She's pretty private with the things that she's private with, I would say. And
we hadn't
she had
heard
not
either
expressed, a real desire to say, hey, I want to go play somewhere else. I want something new.
Yeah. So that part is really, really big. And I think that to me is the whole reason that it could happen, because now everyone's, whether or not the entities are swimming in the same direction or not, there's a direction to go. On the contract side of things, we talked about this a little bit on the kickback committee yesterday. It is odd to me that if it fits inside the bounds of the rules, that you don't allow it. It's a competitive sports league. If Washington wants to ruin their cap, potentially, and the theory of what we've heard is Washington backloaded the contract, assuming the cap goes up over time, whether that's because of
which
new
it
TV
does.
deals.
It's already in the CBA what the increase is.
Right. And we don't know if they're hoping there are even more or not, or they're just trying to calculate to that. If that's the case, it's Washington's competitive right to sign a contract that maybe isn't the best idea if that's what they choose to do. And we don't know what it looked like. That's like the hardest part of all of this. We don't know if they took a roster, if they calculated 25 minimum contracts and then said, we're going to give the rest to Trinity Rodman, which would be a bad sporting decision to do, but would be your right. The other thing about soccer is if you have a player on your books that you can't afford, there are ways to transfer players and contracts away from your team, so you are not guaranteed that you're going to have that stuck. It felt like a preemptive move from NWSL and them saying, we don't think this will be cap eligible in 3 years, so we won't let you sign it now. I can understand the language of getting away with that, which is like, it technically isn't cap eligible in 2026 if you were giving her all of that money. So we're going to look at it this way and we're going to say it's ineligible. It seems like an extra step from a league that probably does need to step in and protect some teams from themselves.
Yeah.
But in terms of who you would trust with decision-making and professionalism and planning, I think the Washington Spirit's front office and ownership group would sit above the league for most people. And I think that's the frustration from the outside of like, you don't need to hold their hand. If Michelle Kang needs to figure this out later, she's going to figure it out later. She's literally the only person on the planet we know 100% would figure this out. And so I think that's the frustration from the outside.
I'm sure the frustration for Kang too is like she does have all this money, and if it was a new player
giving it away,
I know if it was a new player coming into the league, right? She would easily pay a transfer fee to get that player because that doesn't go on your books when it comes to cap. So it's just frustrating that she can't use the money that she would pay to acquire a player like Trinity Rodman to be able to add it to what she's doing. I'm sure that's really frustrating for Michelle Kang because she has the ability to do pretty much whatever she wants, and is doing some really great things with her investments throughout the women's soccer world. Yeah, it just feels like the league is at this weird tipping point when it comes to contracts and cap and how they hold on to players, and how this one continues to play out will really set a precedence in one direction or other, and kind of almost it will, I think, either unlock the league or keep it structured in a way that, as you said, will help multiple teams, but it also won't help you keep the best players that are Americans here in America playing. And I think that's what we want.
Yeah.
Mostly, right? Like, we want the U.S. players who are going to play in the World Cup, who are the most recognizable, to be playing in our league in the United States, not in France, not in Spain, not in England. We want them to be playing here. And I think the other countries have that same desire for their own internationals. And so if you can't figure out a way to keep them, I think that's going to be this is going to be very interesting to see how the rest of this saga turns out.
And we have no idea how it will end, but I think the hope was brought back for me, because I think I felt like coming out of NWSL Championship that on both sides, both the mechanism wouldn't be figured out, and the creativity of this, and the creativity that Haley Carter has mentioned and that Nathan Minion has mentioned is like, okay, so everyone's working on that side of things, which is good. And it's because it kind of felt like, oh, well, they're boxed in. There's this and that, and there's nothing else they could do. And so they're working on structures to try and find a way to do this, which I think is provides that hope. And then Trinity Rodman's desire is to still be there, which wasn't a guarantee. And that wasn't going to be a knock on Washington or the fan base or the city or any of it. No. We have seen players make other decisions or choose other things. She was rehabbing over in Europe. Like, there was all this unknown and all of that around it. Before we move on from here, let's mention Haley Carter here. She's been on this show a couple times. She's one of our favorites. She was the head of sporting for Orlando Pride, put together a team that did a double, set every record last year, and then set a transfer record this year, and was fortunate enough to host a semifinal once again, finish as a top 4 seed. She now leaves Orlando to take over in Washington. The official title, as I said, was President of Soccer Operations. Yes, I just want to make sure I had the wording right there on that one, which comes in sitting above the general manager, who's Nathan Minion. Obviously, there was an opening for this Washington group at the top of the front office, and doesn't feel like a better way you could fill it, Jordan. No,
really good signing. And I saw Haley Carter at NWSL final and just gave her this look because the news just came out, and we talked briefly a couple of times. I didn't really get to have the full-on conversation with her, but I had heard she was going to Washington, and just excited because of, I think if you're trying to lead the strategic plan of an organization and you get to work under an owner like Michelle Kang, that plan is going to be heard and really be invested in. And I think that for Haley Carter and what she's shown, gone from, being a player in Houston and working in Houston to then Orlando, now to Washington, she understands this league really well as a player, as a person in the front office, and she can clearly implement the vision that she has to try to help this Washington Spirit team continue to be leading the league in a lot of categories when it comes to what they're providing for their players and how they want to play and who they're going to bring in. And I think at the top of the Athletic article, it also says her job is to help retain top talent like Trinity Rodman. So I guess that's on her plate too, but knowing her, she sees that as a challenge that she will face head on and do her best to do just that.
It is a wild opening project to work on as joining. Right. It's like, oh, by the way, welcome to the new job. The water's here. The Wi-Fi's this. And the biggest thing you will probably have to do ever is the first thing we're going to start with. And we're a couple weeks behind. So we'd really love to get up to speed on that. It kind of feels a little bit like an Avengers super team move of like, I think we have talked over and over about how special Michelle Kang is as an owner and how much she cares. I think Adrian Gonzalez has proven he's one of the best coaches. And I think if you ask people who's the top sports executive in the league, many would have said Haley Carter before this. So for her to come over and take control of this whole thing, I think is really exciting. It's probably a good time to do it because Adrian just became the full-time coach. So you're not kind of coming into something that's fully established. And I think on top of all of that, one of the things you get from talking to her is she thinks heavily about culture and leadership and the, spaces you want to build for people. And I think there's a lot of big names that are coming in and out of that club that she can do a lot of really good for. And all of her passions about helping grow the game for women all around the world, to tap into Michelle's network and belief and desires with some of that could be really special outside of the Washington Spirit. She had a really funny line in her opening press conference, if you saw, about a lot of international players on the Spirit's roster and dealing with visas. And she was like, I was a Marine. I got over 200 people out of Afghanistan into Australia as a Marine. So I know a thing or two about visas, which is like a crazy extreme on the other end to go to on something like that. But this was a gap that it was like, okay, what's next, right? Washington's been so successful for 3 years now with their draft, the international players they've brought in, like the squad they've built. What's going to come next? And this feels like a home run of an option. Would like to point out, I think it's a little worrying for Orlando that this, in theory, is a lateral move. The two teams have been head-to-head in the table. Orlando just set a transfer record, and the move to Washington, I think, signifies internally, here are the power rankings in people's heads of where they want to be and where these clubs stand. And it feels like now the stress is on Orlando to prove that that's not true. And they've done a lot of that on the field, but the building's not filled for most of the games. They are not as market relevant as Washington is. They have taken half steps back at times. I think Barbara Branda's injury is a large part of that. But it feels like Washington maybe is building the club even bigger. And now the impetus is on Orlando to try and match that if they want to be a heavyweight. And I think Gotham's in there as well. And I think Kansas City's in there. Those are the four I think you would talk about in this way. But this is a signing that, even though it's not on the field, is one of the most sought after people in the league saying, this is where I'm going to put my commitment. This is where I want to take my risk. This is where I think it will be successful. And whether that's because of salary or not all of that means Orlando's behind right now. Yeah. And they're right on the verge. And I think they kind of have a decision to make as a club of, do they want to push the envelope even further and follow the KCs and Washingtons into that world? Or if they're kind of going to sit on the edge and be a little bit different. So it is has to be worrying times for Orlando Pride fans. This is the person who built that roster for you and put that team together. Speaking of, we've got two other non-soccer player conversations to talk about. We will talk about Alyssa Naeher, who just re-signed with Chicago and will be playing another year in NWSL, which we love to see and we love to hear. But we're going to start off the field. Let's start with Portland, who, since we've been gone, has let Rob Gale go as head coach and has not obviously announced a replacement yet. They did announce that their assistant coach, Sarah Loden, would serve as interim head coach. I don't know what that means right now because you don't have a season, but that was what they put in their phrase. But Rob Gale, after being interim last year, being given the full-time job, steps away or is let go at the end of the season. They finished third in the overall table. They won the opening playoff game against San Diego and went to Washington and lost in the semifinals. So a pretty big surprise, I think, across the league that he was let go. I've had conversations with people, behind the scenes, off the record, that some people were surprised and some people weren't. And I think my reaction was, I thought he had done enough to keep the job and keep the opportunity. But if you are, whatever it is, front office ownership group that doesn't fully believe, then you need to make that call earlier rather than later, rather than waste a season. And so if you're looking at the underlying numbers or the environment around the team or whatever it is that are your markers coming out of this year saying, we think that this team can improve and we don't think this was good enough, I would at least rather you be bold and make that decision now and get your full process of interviewing and have someone ready for preseason than to let it lag on. And then 5 games into the year, if he struggles, that's where you make the move. And now you spend the whole season in chaos. Either way, probably not ideal right now for Portland to be without a head coach.
I was shocked. I was like, what is going on in Portland? And even if you have markers that you're trying to get to, guys, this was a team that we picked 13th.
Yes, correct.
Going into the season to finish 13th, and they finished third. And so those markers that these players or the team ended up hitting are with, I'm sorry, Portland, with a bunch of players who were probably not going to be starters at the beginning of the year and then were starters. So, like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, those markers and the point that you're trying to get to, maybe you would have gotten with a Morgan Weaver and a Sophia Wilson and Nicole Payne and the other Mueller, Kaya Hanks. You know, I can keep going and going because they had so many injuries, and yet still they found a way to make it to third. And I get what you're saying. Be bold, make the decision. I understand that. I don't think with what Rob Gale did, it felt like to me, and I don't know the ins and outs of everything, it didn't feel like the right decision to me.
Yeah.
But then the fact that you say that you're naming your assistant coach the interim, to me says you have no plan.
Yeah.
So you have to have an interim because you don't have any idea who your coach is. That's what it says to everybody. So when you fire your head coach at the end of the season, knowing you have preseason starts in a month, 1 month from now. It's December 10th. They're starting January 15th-ish. That's when players are starting. That you have to have an interim head coach because you don't have all your ducks in a row to know who you want after you fire a coach that got you to third in the table. It's a little whack to me.
So all of that I agree with. I think one of the things where I'm saying watch your marks and being bold is they were also 1 point away from being sixth in the league and 2 points away from being seventh. And to not get, the example was the gap for them in the semifinals against Washington was larger than the gap was between them and Gotham ended up winning the championship, but I'd argue them and North Carolina.
I think the biggest issue for Portland over the last few years has been their build. They have not built well. So now you've gotten to a place, you are a dynasty. You are a club that most clubs would be happy with third. Most clubs would be happy with sixth. We got to the playoffs, anything can happen. If you're Portland Thorns, you're not happy unless you win the championship, unless you win the Shield. You have to win one of those trophies. And I think that they have built that reputation within the league. And this is where I'm saying, I don't think it's Rob's fault. I don't think it's the players' fault. I think it's the people's fault who's making the decision on who's on this team. Because if you build correctly and you lose some players, like a Washington, you have the right players to continue to keep the standard high. But if you don't build well, then you're not in the good place. And I don't think it's the people that are there now. I think this has been an issue with Portland over the last few years of player retention, of keeping some of the players with big names who have set the culture. A lot of it has been turnover, right? They've lost a lot of big name players with big reputations and a lot of personality and culture. So, but they haven't filled that. I just don't think they have gotten the pieces to fill in there that they should have, to keep the standard really high, to say, okay, I think with this group that they've built, they should be very happy with third. And maybe they think they can get more out of them, and good for them if that's what they think. I think they squeezed a lot of juice out of that orange. And
I think that makes a ton of sense. I would throw out there that I think a bunch of the decision makers were not a part of not only a lot of this, but not picking Rob Gale. Like, ownership shifted and front office shifted. And if it's not your guy, this is where I'm saying, if it's not your person, I've seen clubs that have existed for a long time where, like, the sporting director and the coach don't agree. So the sporting director is bringing in players that the coach doesn't want to play, or plays them out of position and then says, well, I can't play them. They're not good enough. Or they don't even have a relationship. I mean, I've seen clubs, and you'd know better than me, where, like, the sporting director can't come to the locker room because the coach won't allow it. I'm not saying any of that has happened. But my point is, if you don't think it's your person, but you didn't want to throw this season down the drain, and it was, and as you said, it was good. Like, they were overperforming. But there's a lot of proof this year that they also struggled in a lot of ways. Yes. And some of that should have happened because of the injuries they had. And as you said, the expectations that we had. But then once it went well, it dropped down. They had long stretches where they were struggling. There was, I think, some odd decision-making. I mean, an insistence of playing Castellanos at center forward when maybe there were other options. Not giving Jaden Perry options or opportunities, which I think is one of those things where that's probably a front office thing of like, we think this is a future starter. Like, we need to try and play them. And Rob Gale's looking at it and goes, does she give me the best chance of winning on Saturday right now? Probably not. So I'm not going to. Those are the fights you have. Those are the conversations you have. The back on all of this, which we're not discussing, is Sophia Wilson going to play for this club?
I have no idea. And it feels to me like if...
Has to affect this.
That has to affect this in
I mean,
some
if she
way.
came into a meeting and said, I want to play for Rob Gale, there's no way he's gone.
Right.
And I'm not saying, I would be surprised if it was the other one and it was like that strong of an opinion.
Right.
But I think if clearly is the first, also, but we don't even know if she's coming into a meeting.
I think just seeing her around, she was at the championship, seeing her at the national team this past camp around
with an adorable baby.
With an adorable baby. Oh my goodness, so cute. That makes me feel like better than I felt before because she hadn't been around at all. And I found that just interesting. And of course, you just had a baby, do whatever you want to do. I'm not saying you have to do anything. But the fact that we saw her, I think, is a indication of like, all right, I'm ready to like be back around these people again.
Yeah.
And maybe that's given her a little bit of an itch to get back out on the field and figure out where she's going to be, whether that's in Portland or somewhere else. But I think everybody's hoping, just with everything that's going on, that they see a Sophia Wilson signing at some point, especially people in Portland are hoping that.
Yeah, I mean, she has the player option for this year, and then her contract is up. So she is, in all intents and purposes, a free agent if she wants to be.
Yeah.
I think she could probably decline the option and still re-sign. It doesn't mean she's leaving.
Right.
We haven't heard anything. So that's just this huge factor around all of this, which we don't know what the front office knows, but they have to manage if they think she's coming, or if they don't, what does the team look like and how do you build it otherwise? And it's a huge question mark. And then your hope is you get some of these other players back from injury. And there was a lot to like from last year, and there's a lot of talent that they unearthed that they can feel confident in going forward. And I would say they have built one of the best midfields in the league. So they have this strength that you can build the rest of it off of going forward. Other head coach options as well. Bay FC has announced their new head coach, making the addition in Emma Coates, coming over from England. I have 900 things open, and that one was right there. And now I have an advertisement for holiday bundles from Bay FC.
I got that too.
Emma Coates comes over after guiding England's women's U23 team since 2023, has been inside the England setup for a while. Originally coached their U19s, and before that had coached Doncaster Rovers as a club. And obviously the part of the context around this is Bay FC's brought in a new sporting director who also comes from the England FA. So you're talking about two people who have worked together very closely, and this is now your second coach hiring, but probably some really similar ideas in terms of soccer and background there for this Bay FC club. I will be honest, I don't watch a ton of England U23 games, but what did you make of this when you saw the news come out? And I can go crunch tape if I need to.
Yeah, I do with all my free time. That's like my favorite pastime.
While you're reading law books. about
workers' law.
Employment law.
There we go. I knew what it was called, of course.
Well, it says it on the top of the book.
Yeah. I have not watched a lot. But it makes sense with the relationship between the sporting director and now the head coach knowing each other from England. And I'm interested to see. It says in the press release, too, a part of the English national team that had success in both of the last Euros. So at what part is she helping in those? I think people would be maybe thinking like this is a very... From what we saw England this year, it was a lot more defensive than it was in the first Euros, right? Like you're just trying to grasp at like any kind of how is this style of play going to look like under Coates for this Bay FC team. But I think I'm excited. You're bringing someone in with new ideas, clearly experience working at the international level. One of the things that she said that she's most excited about is being back on the grass. Both her and Gemma Davies both said grass, like being on the grass. every single day, which I don't know, it was like an English thing.
Yeah,
like
I think
instead of
it
like
is.
being out on the field, like
Yeah, I think it is.
they're just excited to be out on the grass.
Just loving grass.
Yeah, they love grass. The Bay Area has great grass, so they're going to enjoy that. And they're going to have a brand new training facility to be able to train their team in. And I think that'll open this year for Bay FC. There's a lot to look forward to if you're a coach coming into Bay, because there's good pieces there, but you could tell it's seeking structure. It's just really, these players want to know exactly what's expected of them. And I think they're hopeful that this is the right move and that they can jump from a place where it was a little bit all over the place with their performances to being more consistent week in and week out.
Yeah, there is a lot of potential with this club, and there is not a lot of proof yet. And so you're trying to do, I think, two things right now. You're trying to establish, that's the wrong phrase, refurbish what's already there, which is like a lot of great talent. I think we saw their rookies last year were really impressive. Obviously, Kundananje is one of the best in the league. Abby Dahlkemper, if she can be healthy and be there for you. Like, there's a lot there to like. It's not just, okay, we're slow rebuild. What do we look like in 4 years?
Tess Bodie, Taylor Huff,
Dorian
awesome. Bailey, really good core players.
So that's, I think, the main side of this is like, how can we win now, but also build a structure to win in the future? So you look at a coach whose youth background is youth development. Yeah. Can you help those players get better? Can you then also bring talent in that you're starting to develop for the future to fill in for some of the stars who might be leaving? And I think just have an overall soccer idea. It felt like Albertine Montoya really swung from possession to defensive. And inside of those big swings, it felt like there was a lot of movement week to week. You talked about being consistent. Like, I don't know that they ever knew who they were. And so they was very reactive to opponents as things went along. And I think from year one, it felt like they were going in the right direction, and then it sort of fell apart in year two. So this feels like a hard reset in terms of sporting structure for this club, where maybe they did not get it right. I mean, they didn't get it right from out the gate. Like, Lucy Rushton's already left the club. Like, there's a lot that went wrong, which is hard now to redo. But there's still some good pieces in there from a soccer point of view. So can you do the work on the back end to rebuild the structure and scouting department and, what's your game model and all that type of stuff, while also being competitive on the field? And this feels like a good opportunity to try and do both. But there's a bit of unknown. Has not been a head coach at a club level in 5 years. Has never competed in NWSL, and that comes among some of the structure that has not been around NWSL. So there's massive question marks around this, the idea around this. But I feel like one of the things we saw last year was a lot of people come into NWSL, especially as coaches who hadn't been there, be fairly successful. I think Jonas Eideval, obviously high on that list. I mean, Adrian Gonzalez 2 years ago that became Jonathan Heraldez. I think there's proof that, if you have strong overall soccer concepts and you're intelligent and can sort of grasp things quickly, you can figure it out. And so I'm less committed to they have to have NWSL experience and more, do you have the right person in the role?
I think you nailed that. I'm with you.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah, nailed it.
Okay, before we get into some of the things we've been thinking about, Alyssa Naeher, re-signing with Chicago, so one more year at least. It just felt like we never got the opportunity to really say goodbye. And
good.
She's
you
not.
Can't say goodbye on that year.
No, but
the last 2 years have just been. She's just been peppered with so many terrible goals. She can't leave like that.
And I will say, in the comments she makes, she does not say a last year. So
true.
She is saying another year.
Of course,
she's ready to compete. And that's not shocking. But Jordan, we wanted to talk about Chicago anyway.
Okay.
How can this club be better for Alyssa Naeher in this next year?
Oh, yeah. So are we going to our things that were...
Yeah, let's do it because it fits.
A few things that we're, just are keeping us excited about.
Roses and whiskers on
kittens. I really emphasize the T's in kittens.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because people won't know otherwise what you're saying.
I know. Okay, now that I've taken us off that track.
I've had to read a lot of scripts recently, and me mumbling through sentences with the same letter over and over. You're like, I don't even know how to say the letter P anymore.
Yeah, well, you got to emphasize.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's get back to a few things that we are just kind of noodling before 2026. We talked about Bay and now Chicago, and these are two things that I'm really excited to see what happens in 2026 for both of these teams. We just talked about why we're excited for Bay. Now with Chicago, we saw what assistant coach, formerly interim head coach, Anders Jacobson did with the team, and now to bring in Martin Sjögren. We're going to work on how to say his last name because, that's hard for me. But I have heard really good things about him from Ella Masser, about how he has a plan, and you could already see that plan be related through what Jakobsen was doing with the Stars at the end of the year. It looked like they had a real structure. They were more attacking minded. They were getting more players in the attack. And I feel like when you're Alyssa Naeher and you see that things are looking more stable on, okay, we're going to have the ball a little bit more. We're going to be in an attacking posture more often. And actually that is going to help us defend higher up on the field. I would probably sign up for another year too, because I would be hoping I would give up less goals than before. And I think they're in a good spot. One thing I'm hopeful for both of these teams is that they add a couple of key pieces, because it does feel like they're missing something. I think Bay needs a 9, right? They need someone to be able to really add, be a point in their attack centrally that can be the focal point. And then for Chicago, how does it look with Mallory Swanson back, I think is the big question.
You cut out for a second, and when you said needs a 9, I thought you were talking about Chicago, and I was going to ask you a question, which is less relevant now.
I was talking about Bay. Yeah, but that's okay.
I think of the two of them, I'm actually more excited for Chicago, and maybe that's the potential for a jump versus we saw who Bay was 2 years ago, and maybe the idea is they'll probably be close to at least around there. With Chicago, though, it feels like, and one of the reasons I'm excited to see Kickback Committee's own Brianna Pinto get there is it feels like there is so much vertical threat and danger and 1v1 ability. And if they can just have someone pull the strings a little bit, Ludmila, Chacon, and you talk about Joseph, who's already been there, and now if Mal Swanson comes back, there is a lot of threat and danger and attack to that team. And they found defensive stability as Sam Staub got back, and Alyssa Naeher returning makes that even easier for them. And so it feels like a very obvious pathway forward for them, where the hardest thing to do is score goals and create chances. Right. And most teams, when they struggle, Utah 2 years ago, Houston last year, okay, where are you going to find that? That feels like Chicago already has that, which wasn't the case for all of last year.
Right.
When they lost Mal Swanson for the season, before they brought some of the additions that they ended up bringing in, the team felt very toothless, and it felt like teams could press high on them because you weren't going to hurt them over the top, and they couldn't really play into your shape, and there wasn't a ton of threat 1v1. But as they found, I think, getting Ludmila more comfortable and confident, and as they found themselves as the season went long, and Grosso, it felt really Grosso settled into NWSL. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of options there where now life becomes easier for a Mal Swanson to come back into, or it becomes easier for a new addition to get added into. And so I think there should be excitement about this team, but with that, there should be expectations. And the expectation floor should be you just have to be more professional and competitive as a club. That's not on the players. That's on the club. Totally. Some of the signings they made of 3-month signings, college players who were not ready, all that stuff over the last 2 years is borderline unacceptable.
Which is interesting because they also, that's under new ownership. That wasn't under previous ownership.
Yes.
I agree. I think that I'm hopeful that getting a new head coach, and I guess they upped some of their training facilities over the year as well. Things like that will help you not just get players in the door, but retain those players too is going to be important. I think bringing in Hendrich was really big for them too. The center back from Germany added a lot of professionalism into this group that lacked some really lacked leadership in that back line, I would say, because Staub was, it's just, she is a leader, but she's focused on, like, I'm just getting back from injury. So you bring in Hendrick, and I thought those two did really well together. If they're going to be, in my opinion, of what a good NWSL, like competing in every single game and in the style of play, I think they have to upgrade their outside backs. And I'm interested to see if and how they can do that, or what they get out of the players that they already have. So, because it does feel like they were going to want the ball and to play progressively through the thirds. And how can those players in different times add to the attack? They lack that, and then it kind of comes one-dimensional, right? Like, our wingers have to do everything, and you want your wingers to do a lot, but not everything, right? You want them at times to be able to be front runners in a two-front. You want them to be able to isolate in the channel. So it'll just give them some different looks, but I think that's one of the areas. And then I know Brianna Pinto is going there. Will she play as a 10? Will she play as an 8? But they lose Ali Schlegel, which I think will actually be pretty difficult for this team, because she has kind of become the heartbeat of this Red Stars squad.
She does a lot of dirty work for all the attacking players we mentioned, which someone else has to do that. Like, that's the big expectation for them, is if you don't replace her in some way, then you need everyone to give 7% more in that way of chasing down dead balls, of challenging center backs, of making life miserable, of holding it a little bit longer, drawing fouls when the game's against you, like all this stuff that she does really, really well. And I don't want to be too excited about her moving to North Carolina, because I feel like last year when North Carolina brought in what I thought was going to be the right center forward, I got really excited, and it didn't really work out. So I'm going to let myself wait and not get hurt again.
All right. That will be a few of our things then.
On that one, it will be our next things that we'll be pondering. I was going to throw one out there about Gotham FC, which is an obvious one to say. They just won. I think one of the things that I came around to coming out of the championship, which we talked about in our show after, was like, going into it, everyone's like, well, of course, Gotham are Giants. And they are in the global stratosphere of soccer. And I really didn't feel like on the field they were this year. And I don't know that I felt that way for the last 2 years. And I think what I came around to was they won the title somewhat unexpectedly 3 years ago now. And the team wasn't really built to then take a next step. And they got this opportunity to add all these superstars. And they did so because you never don't do that. Like, you always take that risk.
Yeah.
And now this feels sustainable to me. And the way they've built, this feels like year one of a run and a dynasty. And so I'm excited to see them take the next step. Is Midge Purse come back? I don't know. Like, there are big questions in all of that. But I look at this group and I think of all the young players that were a part of it that I think can get better and should get better as they go along. Plus a Tierna Davidson coming back from injury and getting a full year of Ella Stevens. So to me, I'm excited because I think these Giants and dynasties are necessary. Like, that's what's box office. That's what brings ratings, is having Giants being like, can anyone beat them? Can anyone take advantage? Or when they come to town, everyone wants to come out and see them. And that's partially stars, but it's also the success of a team. And so it feels to me like now got like almost like that one. I don't want to say fluke because that's not the right term, because the team that was built wasn't fluky, but it was built on Ali Krieger and other players that weren't going to be around for the long term. And now this one feels like was built with a longer runway in mind. And I think the league needs these types of teams to continue to push things. I think Orlando's won. I think Washington's won, as I've said. And I think Kansas City's won, even though they didn't make it to, they didn't win a playoff game and make it to a championship.
I will have to break your heart a little bit, but I do know Ella Stevens is not returning. I think that was announced. Yes.
Okay. Well,
but she'll be in NWSL hopefully somewhere. So
great.
You can bring that fandom somewhere else.
I would watch Ella Stevens play on any
I know. I think
field
everybody's just hopeful she'll be healthy, because she is such a joy to watch.
She would be a World Sevens first pick for me.
For sure.
You're talking about 1v1 ability.
I wonder what NWSL teams watching. I bet everybody watched and was like, I want to play in that.
Yeah.
Like, sign me up. Let's go next year. Even though it's right at the end of the season, it looked like they had the best time. anyways, I liked what you said about Gotham, and I think that's why people get into sports, right? It's the Chicago Bulls in the 90s, right? It's the Dallas Cowboys in the 90s. Why am I only talking about 90s, right? Or the New England Patriots.
We be old.
Yeah, we be old. You get into those, and then there's always a story around it, right? You want to beat that team. You want to take them off their pedestal. And I do feel like Gotham has done such a good job of setting the tone by bringing in Yael Averbuch-West, Juan Carlos Amoros, and those two have set the culture of like, we're going to get better. And it might not be evident every single week that like this team, I would say the first half of this season was not great for Gotham at all, but they just kept plugging away and they kept finding a way to stay in it and around it. And in that, individual players got so much better. I think we saw the best year we've ever seen of Jalen Howe. And that's just the beginning of what I think we can see from her. So there is a lot to like and still be excited for of progression when it comes to this Gotham squad. And they can do that now with 2 stars above their chest.
And Jaden Shaw, hopefully just continuing to get better. I think we saw it with the national team, how comfortable she looks. Okay, so the other ones we both kind of had the same things when we talked about it before. Should we just roll through these quickly? So we'll just roll through them. Let's start with expansion, because we always have to talk about expansion. Denver and Boston coming into the league. I think we had different thoughts about it, but it's one of the things I think we're both thinking about all the time.
Yeah, I'm excited because it's new ideas into the league. We're seeing 2 new coaches. We're seeing a bunch of new players coming from, I think especially in Boston already, we've seen 2 new Brazilians come in. What are they going to add to this league? And then what players from around the league are going to these teams? And expansion year is interesting, right? Last year was interesting. Sorry, not 2025 last year. 2024 was interesting because everybody kind of tries to find their new footing without some of the big players that they've had that have gone to different teams. And so I am interested to see how it settles across the whole entire league. But more than anything, just 2 new styles of play, Goss. Like 2 new coaches with different ideas, a Portuguese coach, an English coach. I'm very intrigued to see what that looks like when it comes to the beginning of the year.
I also am excited for this. I think the way you talked about it, which I hadn't fully thought, is just 52 more roster spots, like more talent coming in, more players, more options, and obviously the change in styles. To me, the thing that I'm really fascinated by is post the new CBA, is it easier or harder? Because when you look back at expansions, I mean, Ali Sentnor was the best player the first year on Utah. Ali Sentnor doesn't go to Utah if there's no draft.
Right.
But also the team wasn't good enough to take advantage and build it. And so I think there's disadvantages to an expansion draft and being required to sign specific players in a specific way and having draft picks, but also wildly valuable. So I'm very excited to see, what does it look like now? Is it easier? Is it harder? Is it just different? My guess will be it'll end up being easier because you just have more flexibility to do it however you want. But I think maybe one of the issues both clubs might have is not having the same level of NWSL experience because you didn't have the expansion draft to go through and bring those players in. But I've been fairly excited about most of the names I've seen already come through. But we're going to talk now about some young players. And I would say if this was a normal year, whichever team's number 1 is drafting Jordan Dudley, and that's potentially a world-class player coming into your club without you figuring anything out.
Right.
Now the responsibility is on them to go try and sell her and bring her in, and maybe that's the right move and maybe that's not.
Should we do right now, congratulations to Florida State for winning another national championship?
We absolutely should.
Since you just talked about Jordan Dudley.
Yeah.
Great, there it is. Congrats!
They beat Stanford. You love that, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I have no rivalry with any of this, so I don't care.
Yeah. Okay, carry on.
Let's talk about rookies, because I was really excited about the rookie class this year. And I think one of the things that I have been looking at as I talked about that Gotham conversation specifically is I think we're talking about a huge crop of players that are going to be really good next year and step into some huge responsibility roles and hopefully continue to advance their careers. So I think I've been thinking about two. One, what's the next rookie class look like? Was this just special? Or is this the reality of the new CBA, which is if you could pick your spot rather than being forced into a team, maybe you end up in more comfortable situations. Maybe the responsibility for the club is higher of like, well, we sold you on this. We promised you this. This is sort of what we owe you. But either way, this was a special group of players. So Lily Real ended up with the Rookie of the Year. Riley Tiernan was in the voting as well, as was Maddie Deline. But those are 3 of 12 players I had down here of Kaya Hanks, Jaden Perry, Maggie Graham, Ella Haas, Sarah Weber, how important she was for Louisville, Hasbo and Shapansky in Gotham. Like, there are so many young players who stepped into the league this year and looked ready to play.
Was Joseph a rookie?
No, this is her second year.
Second year.
But she's like so young that she keeps getting called into those futures camps for the US
national team.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm excited to see the roles that those players from 2025 who are rookies,
Trinity
what they play.
Armstrong was.
What'd you say? Trinity Armstrong, Taylor Huff.
Yeah.
Like, they've already played big roles, but now how do you make that sophomore season not a sophomore slump? That's a good question. And what is the expectation on you now that you know what the league is like? But also, I think one of the fun things is I used to have to prep for a draft and have to look through all the highlights of all these different players and call all my coach friends around the country and be like, what's about this player? What's about this player? And now that I don't do that, I really feel like I show up and get to see these players play without much, I don't watch a ton of college soccer because I don't have time to watch it with my other jobs that we talked about. So
that's when you're at the law firm.
Yeah. So I don't watch a ton of college soccer, and I get to see what these players can do at the next level. And it felt like this year they seamlessly fit in. Will that happen every year? Will that happen in 2026? I'm curious, and I'm really excited to see some of the players that I did watch the national championship, some of those players come into NWSL and how they can hold their own here. So it's a good thing to think about. And I there's actually one of the other things that I was thinking about. I think this is our last one, is it? And
I mean, you don't have to ask if you want to say more.
No, I think the last one was just the 2 players that I liked watching all season long, Kimi Ascanio and Manaka Matsukubo. And they happen to be really young players, 17 for Ascanio, 20 for Manaka. She ends up winning midfielder of the year. But separately, I loved watching when their teams played because you didn't know what you were going to get from either one of them. I mean, you knew you would get consistency, and I think Ascanio really caught me by surprise. We saw her play a little bit last year, but she played in 4 different positions this year, and every position she looked like that was her position. Like, fine, I can do this. I can be the best player at this position. So where does she really, truly fit in with the San Diego team in 2026? So she can play in the same spot every single year. I think that's one of the things I'm looking forward to next year. And then I just can't wait for more chip goals from Manaka and more just little cheekiness from her because she's just so sweet and freaking good. Yeah. She's so good. And I love watching her play. Will North Carolina add some pieces around her so she can continue to dish to other players? But it's the goals, more goals from Manaka for me.
I love that. And I will say the one thing without the draft, which besides just your research, is you don't have a draft list. So there's no like, well, this is the 2nd ranked player. This is the 3rd ranked player. Like, we don't see what the payment is in contracts. So the length of contracts, which shows the value people have. And obviously you have Mac Herman trophy voting, and you have experts that I think we both follow that cover the college game even more and can talk about transitions. But when you come out of a draft, it's like, well, this is the number 7 pick. That's the expectation. This is the number 10 pick. That's the expectation. You lose that scale a little bit as well, which makes it really, really fun. Then when you get into the year, congrats to Lily Real for the Rookie of the Year trophy and won an NWSL championship, and then went and played for the U.S. Women's National Team. So it's like not a bad month
average
for
couple
her.
of weeks for her.
Yeah, not a bad month for her at all. Well, thank you to all of you for being here. We've got one more live show that we're going to be doing next week. We're going to work on some stuff to tide you over the holiday period, and then we will be back, of course, in 2026. But it's been a blast covering this season from start to finish, and the news feels like it just never stops,
Never.
So we've got a lot to talk about going forward. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.